Barbara, I need your assistance, please. How do I get that thing on the side? Do I hit chat?
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let's just.
Good evening. It's looks like it's about that time. You know, so I'm gonna unmute everybody. We can hear a cacophony. I think that's the right word with more people speaking. So we got 72 people on. It'll ramp up a little bit. Last week, I had someone write to me and said he saw the participant number hit 220 at one point. So right away here, I'm gonna mute everybody because there's all the background noise and everything that goes on. So everyone now is muted. You can unmute yourself, and there'll be questions that come up on the chat. You can look at, if you click chat on the bottom of your screen, you'll see it come up over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can ask questions, and I'll keep working through those. And then when Greg Perigo, for instance, has got a note in here. It isn't a tech question. I did see on there, Greg. Then I'll call on you, and we can have a talk. So normally my seminar runs about 2 hours, but there's always so many more questions at the end, and I just can't get to them all. So it usually drifts a little more than 2 hours. Last time we did 2.5 hours, and that was really great. I always make this unabashed pitch for going to my website, and I still don't have a sign up behind me that says what my website is, but it's universitymotorsltd.com. It's still my original website. It would be just universitymotors.com had the guy who was supposed to be keeping an eye on that name about 25 years ago, if you're longer ago than that, maybe 30 years ago, if he actually paid attention, I was all set to pay the guy who had universitymotors.com $500 for the use of the name, but he lost it. He also was in prison. He was a car dealer. And anyway, it just didn't work out. So I got universitymotorsltd.com. Just had a guy call me the other day. And he says, he started in on something or other. And I said, wait a minute. I said, you're trying to reach University Motors in Morgantown, West Virginia. And he goes, well, yeah. I said, well, that ain't me. So anyway, there's a bunch of University Motors around. Some are .com and some are .biz. But I'm universitymotorsltd.com. So on that site, you can go, there's a little PayPal button. You can push the PayPal button and make a donation. So to thank those people, as I did last week, who have made donations, and I don't have a complete list yet. I got a note, Larry, if you're on from Florida, I did send you a note back on Facebook. So I haven't got all the way back. I've got a lot of donations, and I've been very tardy in thanking the people who have sent money. But I thank you very much. Let me run through a list. I've got a list here of not communists inside the State Department. This is a better list. This is the list of, this is on election day. Everybody wants to get off and see what's going on in their own elections, probably. Anyway, this is a list of the people who have donated money, and it includes the list from last week. I didn't zero those out. So I'm just going to go through them real quickly, but it's a page or so. Bill Bomer, Bill Fisher, Bill Rosefear, Bob Bessinger, Brian at BMC in Minnesota, Clay Wiseman, Craig West, Crystal Johnson, thank you several times, Dan McGovern, David Henneberry, David Kelp, Dave Smittle, Dave Vincent, Dean Hickenlooper, who had the most interesting thing happen to his engine. Maybe we'll get around to that a little bit later. Dean Wheeler, Dennis Davey, Dennis Hale, Dennis Van Huss, Diana Cunningham, Doug Clark, Doug Miller, Drew Perrin, Eric Van Note, Felix Negron, Francis Cataldo, oh, I hate to mess up names, Gerald Adams, Greg Estep, James Martin, James Turk, Johan Peterson, John Dykheis, Ken Stepka, Lawrence Jobert, Lou Balla, Mark Goldfarb, Michael Green, Mike Grogan, Mike White, Mike Nestel, Mike Tremblay. As you can tell, I've organized these on my computer by first name. Milt Babrak, a couple of times, thank you. Nathan Dickerson is very generous, thank you. Neil Bryden, Norm Block, a couple of times. Pat Guest, Paul Hussman, Paul Kraus, Paul Koreski, Ralph Stanley, Richard Caldwell, Richard Jasmus, Rob Crozier, Rob Gangwer, Robert Mance, Roger Cyril, Ron McDonald, a couple times, Ruth Arnold, Ryan Myers, Scott Lynn, Severio Pota, Sean English, Stephanie Gebka, Steve Strauss, Tom Custer, Tom Dupar, Tom Snook, Tom Starkweather, Tony Shoviak a couple of times. So I'll try not to read the whole list again next time, but give me some time yet this week, please, to thank those who donated in early June and May and April. I shouldn't be so tardy in all this kind of stuff. So last week, I said that I'd say a few words about my trip to England. Now, in 1971, in November of 1971, the light went off. The MG God spoke to me through the clouds. Every one of my friends was doing something. They were all going off to school. They're joining the Peace Corps, protesting the war. It was a really action-packed time, November 1971. And I'd already been in and out of college a couple of times. I'd already been in the Army, been in Vietnam. And I was working on MGs with another guy. And all of a sudden it came to me what I would do in my life. And that is I'd be an MG dealer. As it turns out, I never was a dealer. So I contacted the local dealer. I came to Grand Rapids and talked to the dealer here. And he says, well, kid, you ever worked at a gas station? I said, no, not likely. And he said, well, we got to have some sort of, mechanical experience to hire you. So I went away with my tail between my legs, and I thought, what am I going to do here to impress this prospective employer? I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go to England. I'll get a job in England. Now, why was I in service anyway? If I wanted to have a dealership, because in the 70s, if you remember the 70s, everyone hated service. The dealers lost money on service. They hated all the people that came in. They wish they didn't have to do service. The car manufacturers didn't train people right. The cars weren't as good as they are today. They lost money on it. Everyone hated the dealer. I took my car to the dealer and I got screwed. It was just bad all around. I thought, my God, if I could get good service and then get a training in parts and then finally a training in sales, then I'd get my own dealership. So anyway, I decided I'd go to England and I'd get a job there, and then I'd come back here and stand in front of my prospective employer and next to another kid, right? And the prospective employer would say to the other kid, so what have you been doing the last 6 months? And that kid would say, well, I've been working at Don's Arco, changing oil. And he'd look at me and say, what have you been doing? I say, well, I've been working on MGs in England. Now, who's going to get the job, right? So I went to England. I went there. I found a job at University Motors. I stole their name, fair and square. I got to London. I looked up University Motors. They were right in the phone book. I went out there. I told the service manager, Jimmy White, what I was trying to do, where I was going with this thing. He had a great big scar above his eye that he was looking into a periscope in a tank in the Battle of El Alamein. So a lot of old good World War II guys there. Anyway, they'd hit an embankment or something, and he jammed his eye against this periscope, opened his forehead up. Anyway, I got a job at University Motors. And then I came back to the United States because, of course, England wouldn't allow people without jobs to come into England. I mean, otherwise the whole country would fill up with illegal immigrants. What a novel approach. So I came back here and waited until they assured me that they had my work permit. So I closed down my shop, said goodbye to my girlfriend, and I went to England. I flew Icelandic. Remember Icelandic? They went through Iceland, obviously, and it was real cheap. But they landed in Luxembourg, and at the time, it took a day to get anywhere from Luxembourg City. It was horrible. But anyway, it was cheap. So I flew Icelandic, and I got to Calais, and I got on the boat, and I took the ferry over to Dover. And there was 100 people in front of me and 100 people behind me, and 100 people in front of me, all the, what are you doing here? I'm a tourist, I'm a student, everything. Stamp, 6 months, no problem, get to me. What are you doing here? I said, I got a job. And the guy goes, you got a work permit? I said, I thought it was sort of a concept. And he goes, no, mate, it's a piece of paper. And I said, no, I don't have a piece of paper. So they put me in a lockup. I said, you're going to deport me? They were going to put me in here and give my passport to the ship captain and send me back to Calais. And I said, this is a downer here, dude. I'm coming here for all the right reasons. And he said, well, just come back when you get the work permit. So I have my passport. This is, I made mention of this. Is my favorite passport, Z1074077, issued to me in Saigon, Vietnam. And in here, right there is the cross where it's, right through it says immigration official number 300 at Dover. And anyway, they put me in a lockup with a Turk with a guitar who was obviously coming in to work and was lying to him. And then there was a sweaty American guy who lost all his traveler's checks, but he got those, so he didn't have to go back to Calais. Anyway, I went to Calais, I went back to Brussels. I'd worked in Brussels a couple of years before in a supermarket, bottle return, get a job after high school, one of those deals back in the 60s, and hung out there for a couple of weeks and then got back into England. They let me in for 30 days and I began my campaign to get my work permit. Of course, they didn't want to give me a work permit because I was in country. So I went to the labor office and they said, we're not going to do anything. I went to the export office. I said, look, I've come here to work for 11 shillings an hour and so I can go back to the United States and service MGs. You'll sell more MGs. Oh, that's very kind, everything, but we don't give out work permits. So I'm right down to the last weekend of my month there, and the guy who was the director of a branch of my grandfather's business in London said, well, our MP, our local MP is having a surgery Saturday morning. Would you like to come out? I said, a surgery? He says, yeah, where he meets his constituents. I said, I knew what that meant. And so I went out on Saturday morning and I met the MP that was sitting from Potter's Bar, conservative. And Monday I had all my papers. It was like being a veteran and knowing your congressman. So I ended up staying in England for about a year. That MP was Cecil Parkinson. He was in line to replace Margaret Thatcher, but made the terrible error of impregnating someone besides his wife and then promising to marry her and not. So anyway, they only brought him out of retirement when the Conservative Party got in tough shape. And now I'm off into politics and everyone wants to know about what's going on in their local politics. So I shan't go on too much longer. That's 15 minutes of a little bit of my story. What I want to talk about tonight, just to start off, is power. I put up a video. I can't show it here, because there'd be all kinds of lags and it wouldn't come through right. But if you're on Facebook, you can go on Facebook and you can see I'm doing about 4 grand and doing 70, 72 miles an hour in my 1962 MGA with a 1622 engine, overboard 30,000s. And I very slow, well, yeah, very slowly. It isn't a full throttle acceleration. I take it up to 5 grand. Now I'm doing 90. So you're looking at this going, dude, you know, like all those old gauges are flawed. But I have my iPhone, and I have on my iPhone an app, a GPS speedometer, and I put it in my car, and I looked at it, and it's correct at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90 miles an hour. So I was doing 90, and I just got my front wheels fixed. Finally, I bought that MG in 1976, and I hadn't been able to get rid of a wobble in the front end until I had my wheels re-wheeled, re-rimmed at a place called Diamond Wheel in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So anyway, this is the first time I've driven it, and it's just smooth. Not as smooth as glass. It didn't like driving my Equinox, you know, but it's close. Anyway, I'm doing 90 miles an hour, and you can see that on Facebook. The point is you can drive these cars very quickly. Let me just say a few things about tuning. First of all, horsepower equals torque times RPM. The fact, that's the math behind it, the physics. Horsepower equals torque times RPM. Torque is expensive, RPM is your foot, right? The more you put your foot down on the throttle, the faster the engine's going and the more energy it's going to make, the more power it's going to make. I was at in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, at a British Motor Trade Association conference, oh gosh, I don't know, better part of 10 years ago. And we were supposed to go to a car museum and that got screwed up. We ended up going to a motorcycle museum on Saturday night, just before our dinner. And I'm not a car guy. I'm not a motorcycle guy. Nothing really interested me. But there was a blow apart diagram up on the wall of the engine and gearbox of a Honda motorcycle. And it was all folded out with all the pieces all laid out. It was just this beautiful, beautiful drawing. And I'm studying it and looking at it. And down in the corner, it says, I don't know, 32 horsepower at 15,000 RPM. It's like 15,000 RPM. Holy moly, but that's it. Horsepower equals torque times RPM. So the only prohibition to RPM in your engine, in your MG, is the balance of the engine. So when you have the engine done, you can have it balanced. Balanced to what? Well, the red line occurs at 5,500 RPM. 6 grand on the twin cams, but at 5,500 RPMs on the A's and the B's, and that's just that's a warranty number, right? They're warning you there. Don't go up there. Don't go up there because there's trouble up there. They don't want the engine to blow up and have to suffer a warranty claim. But if you get it balanced, I mean the racers run them at 8 grand, right? So you can spin that engine up. There's all kinds of tricks to making things lighter on the inside and stronger on the inside. I got these massive, massive connecting rods in that MGA. Oh my God, they weigh so much. It's just craziness. And by 1980, the connecting rods weigh just a fraction of what the earlier MGA ones do, the 3 main engines. Anyway, get the engine balanced. Now, torque. Torque is a function of breathing, really. Now, the V8 guys, you know, when they walk around, they've stuffed a V8 into an MGA or an MGB, and the standard line is there's no replacement for displacement. Well, if you got 3,500 cc's underneath the bonnet versus 1,800, sure, it's going to go faster. Of course, it's going to go faster. But for you, working with your MG engine, it's all about breathing. So the first thing is to get the head ported and polished. Now, there really isn't much polishing going on, but it's porting. And it's porting the exhaust valve, the valve areas, as much as it is the inlet to get the exhaust out, so the heat doesn't get so high inside the engine. Therefore, once you get the heat reduced, or if you got an aluminum cylinder head, you can pop the compression up. You get about, I don't know, maybe 5 horsepower for every half point of compression. So if you can push it up to like 11-to-1, you're doing okay. But 11-to-1 static with just a normal cam isn't going to give you a whole lot. It may give you trouble, and you got to go to a better cam. Now, the cam is the main controller in the whole engine. It decides whether it's going to run clockwise or anti-clockwise, whether it runs best at 80, 800, or 8,000 RPM. The cam is the main controller. So you have to get a cam that's matched with the compression ratio. And what I'm running in my car right now is Dave Anton's VP12. Round town, sounds like I can't tune my own car, but around $3,000 it comes in, and it's great. It's just great. Stock cam is great for almost all applications. It's got a 265, 260, I can't remember, duration. The one I've got is like 280. It's like really, really aggressive. But it just means it runs poorly at low RPM. So again, power, making your car run faster. It's all about breathing. You know, the MGAs and the air cleaners, the dual carbureted ones, have a little aluminum disc on the inside of the air cleaner that you could suggest as part of the carburetor, and it's got a radius to it, and the air slips through it. You take those off, you lose 2 horsepower. 2 horsepower on what? Well, when you check an MGB at the rear wheels, just a standard MGA, you're getting about 60 horsepower. What? Isn't it more than that? But, you know, my engine guy says I got, you know, 140 in my engine. By the time he gets back to the rear wheels, let me tell you, 60 is pretty common. And the best we were ever able to do on a dual carbureted B without, I mean, you put a blower on it, stuff like that, it's all together different, but just a stock B, is 75 horsepower, which is 15 on 60, which is a quarter more, or a fifth more, depending on which way you're using your calculator. But it's a lot. So breathing is what it's all about. You got to get that. You can dump fuel in. There's no magic about getting fuel in the carburetor or fuel in the engine. You can get fuel in easy, but it's getting the air in. And the air hates corners. It loves smooth radiuses. And you can take that MGB device off the air cleaner, and you can put that with some work into your MGA air cleaners. Those work. And TR6s don't have those at all. It's like, you know, you got the great big 6-cylinder engine, these great big carburetors, and you've got that raw edge. I wonder what difference it would make on those. You can buy stub stacks from Moss, you know, and use those inside the air cleaners. Anyway, I've prattled on here it's 7:23. So let me just say again, horsepower equals torque times RPM. Torque is your, RPM is your foot. Rev it up. You can rev any engine. You can rev up to $5,000 just quickly. Sustained running is one thing, but just rev it up. Change to the higher RPM. You get a lot more power up there. And torque. And torque is a function of the airflow and the compression ratio. So there's a lot you can read about it, and a lot you can do, but you don't just buy parts and throw them on because they say race. Then you get some bizarre combination of factors, and it may not even run as well as it did to begin with. We used to sort that stuff out at the shop. Anyway, I'm gonna take a look over here on the chat. The first one I have is Skip Karekis, and Skip, you can unmute yourself, and we'll talk about this here for a minute.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, Skip's written, when installing new bearings and races, the manual calls for the shims to achieve the correct end float of 2 to 4 thousandths. The manual calls for a clock gauge to verify. What's a clock gauge? Is this the way you set up the hubs? Oh, we're talking about the front hubs. Okay. All right. Well, it's a dial indicator. It looks like a clock.
Oh,
It's got a magnetic base. In this case, you'd put it on the rotor and put the movable finger on the stub axle. Now, when you grab the rotor and move the rotor in and out, the dial indicator is going to read some kind of deflection, and you're after 2 or 3 thousandths. The way that we used to do it at the shop, and again, you know, people say, well, how tight's that bolt supposed to be? And I know how tight it should be because that's how tight I get it, but I don't put a torque wrench on it. Cylinder heads, of course, you do, but we would set the front end up. If it was brand new, set it up in oil, just set it up in oil, and grab the front hub and move it back and forth, and you should get a slight tunk of free play. A slight tunk. What's that in metric? Hey. So it should spin freely. It should spin freely and have a slight tunk. You put the grease into it, you can't feel the tunk anymore, but it'll spin freely. So that's one way, but that's what they mean about the clock gauge. And two to 4 thousandths. Those shims come at 25, 10, 5, and 3. And if you got disc wheels, it's a dream. You pop it on and off, and you get the right combination of shims. If it's a wire wheel, oh my gosh, get a couple beers and turn on the TV because it's going to take a while. It's just you got to fish down in there with a 90-degree scribe or something and fish these things out of there and try another one. And oh my gosh, it's a task. So where are you, Skip? What city?
Renton, Washington.
Okay, all right.
Just south of Seattle.
Yeah, we've been reading about Seattle lately in the paper. So. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you.
What? I'm not.
Okay. And from Greg Perigo. Greg, if you're on there, you can just step in for a second. And Greg's a longtime guy here. I don't see him here, but he's made a comment about my reel-to-reel tape recorder there in the back, that you can see. So, yeah. Anyway, now we're going to Roger Searle. Thanks for taking my question. And that is, and Roger, you can unmute yourself. He's got a 78B. He's an original owner with the original Zenith carburetor, and is experiencing occasional hesitations, almost like it stops for a fraction of a second. It happens when pulling away or coasting up to a stop or slowing down to make a right turn. I can make it happen at 30 miles an hour by putting the clutch in for several seconds and letting it out and mildly accelerating. Otherwise, the engine runs fine. Okay, so if it's a problem with the ignition, you can tell because the tachometer drops to 0 or begins to drop to 0. If the tachometer is running steadily, then it's probably, I can't say for sure, probably not the ignition side. But there's no substitute for a cap or wires. But this sounds like a whole engine stop. This isn't a misfire. This sounds the way that's described here.
Yeah, it's about a quarter of a second. It just sort of hesitates, and maybe it'll do it once or twice.
Okay. So I had a guy in Chicago who had an originally owned Inca B, he says, my car kills when I take a right-hand turn. And it starts up, runs perfect all the time until I take a right-hand turn and it kills. And it's a long time ago. Oh,
by the way, John, that wasn't right turn, it was tight turn.
Oh, tight, yes, I see that.
Either direction.
Okay, so I thought about this for a while with this guy from Chicago, and I took the hose that comes off the bottom of the anti-run-on valve and goes underneath the coil and up through the radiator diaphragm. I pulled that off the anti-run-on valves, took a deep breath, pursed my lips on it and blew, and out came this collection of, I don't know, water, gasoline, I don't know what all the crap was that came out of it, but there was just enough in that tube so that when he went around the corner, it would slide up, block off the airflow, starve the carburetor for fuel, and as soon as he got going again, it worked perfect. So just from that experience, and that was 40 years ago, I would suggest that you make sure there are no dips in the hoses that come over to the carburetor. That there's the one that comes off the charcoal canister and goes into a pipe, just on top of the valve cover. But it can't have a low spot. If it does, it can get some fluid in it. And in the right combination of times, it can block off the airflow. So I go for all the tubing and stuff around that charcoal canister. If you put your thumb on the end of the hose that comes through the radiator diaphragm, put your thumb on it while the engine's running, it'll speed up and then kill. Okay, because it starts to lean out the carburetor so much it can't run. When it first starts to lean it out, it makes it run a little bit better because almost all the cars run a little rich. But I'd go for that, or it's the high tension side of the ignition system. So I think it's in the carburetor. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's my guess.
Okay, thanks, John.
Armchair analysis. Where are you calling from?
Philadelphia. I'm with the Philadelphia MG Club.
Hey, great. Okay, nice bunch of guys there. Wonderful. Hey, thanks a lot. All right. So the next. You had some more notes on here. Fuel pump's 3 years old. Water in the tank. No. It's been happening for several months. Yeah. Okay. So, and it does say Philadelphia MG Club on there. Yeah. Steve Harding was my original contact in the Philadelphia Club just about 100 years ago, back before the North American MGB register. So, all right. So that takes care of that. I hope I've helped out a little bit. And now we're over to Jeff from 44044 Grafton, Ohio. So I assume that's Jeff. About a 60 MGA 1600, making a very unique sound in the left front wheel as it rolls backwards.
Yes, and it'll only do it rolling backwards. When you roll the car forwards, it does not do it. And it does not do it for an entire revolution of the wheel.
Well,
it's like a low moan, and there's definitely a vibration.
Okay, so just always park downhill, Jeff, and then you don't have to worry about pushing it backwards. Okay, so it's probably the brake pad. I mean, that would be my guess. The brake pad, the pads come in on the rotor, and when you start to move backwards, they move in a funny way, and just as front brakes squeal, when they get hot, and especially grilling systems, twin cams and MGCs squeal a lot, and when they're hot, I would think it's that. So what can you do about it? Well, the cheap trick, the dollar trick, is to take the pads off and take one out at a time and clean the back side of it and put duct tape on it. Put a nice piece of duct tape on it, trim the edges so nothing can fold around the edges and prevent its free movement. But just do that, and that may cut down on the vibration. On the other hand, it doesn't hurt anything. So
the sound is a low moan.
Yeah, but that's the only thing. The only thing that's turning up there is the brake rotor, and it in the bearings, and it doesn't do this when you're backing up, right?
No, that's the only time it does it, when I back up. When I roll forward, it doesn't do it.
Well, you were talking about rolling. If you actually put it in reverse and back it up, it does it no matter what speed you're doing in reverse.
I was just rolling it around, moving it. I wasn't driving it.
Okay, all right. I'm all about the brake pad.
Okay, we'll try it.
Okie doke. Great.
And you were correct. It is 44044.
Yeah, I know. Grafton, Ohio. All right. That's where I bought my first MG, TD 28822. Okay, Jeff, thanks very much. Yeah. And now we're on to Mike Graham. You can unmute yourself, Mike. We've got, here it says, I've got a 67 MGB and occasionally the starter will stick. Have to get under the hood, turn the square nut on the front of the starter to loosen it up so I can start the car. Is there anything I can do to grease or fix the starter? Or do you recommend replacing it with a high torque gear reduction starter? Okay, so the bad news here, Mike, are you unmuted?
Yep.
Okay, so the bad news is that the flywheel is toast, to use the common breakfast expression. The flywheel, the engine always shuts off in one of two positions. The pistons are either like this or they're like this, but the pistons are always halfway up the stroke. As a result, the flywheel is either here or here. And that's why the wear that occurs in the ring gear teeth is always 180 opposed. Now, if you're really cheap, you can take the engine out of the car, drive the ring gear off the flywheel and put it on 90 degrees away, and then you won't have that trouble. You won't do that, of course. If you're going to do anything, you're going to buy a new ring gear. If you buy a high torque starter, you won't have that problem because it's a pre-engaged starter. Our starters, crash starters, Bendix starters, the starter motor starts to move because of inertia. The Bendix then stays in the same spot, although it does start to turn, and it jams up against the flywheel as it's starting to turn over a period of time that chews up the teeth on the flywheel. The pre-engaged starter, 68 through 80, or these high torque starters, they jam the teeth together first and then start turning it. So you probably wouldn't have any problem with a high torque starter putting it in from the front, unless of course you're with a bunch of MG people and you go to start your car and it sounds like a Mazda starting up. It doesn't sound like an MG. So I don't know, point of originality. So anyway, that's it. That's the sad truth there. And you don't have to unscrew the starter motor. Sometimes you do. I mean, you've got a technique that you're using now, but if you just put it in fourth gear and push it backwards, that usually loosens it up too.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that isn't quite as difficult as getting the bond. Although you've been doing this for a while, probably, so you got a technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really only happens about once every 20 starts, so it's not too bad.
Well, once it gets down to every 2 starts, then you'll have to make the decision.
Yeah.
Whether to replace the ring gear or to fit that high torque starter. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, John.
Yeah, where are you calling from, Mike?
3 Rivers, Michigan.
Oh, all right. Okay. I don't know the zip code. 493 Rivers. 3 Rivers. 49093. 93. Oh my gosh, way up there. All right. Okie doke. Catch you later.
Thank you.
And my next one up here is Mel Goldberg. You driving your MG8 at 80 miles an hour. You can unmute yourself, Mel, but it's just humor here. What kind of hat stays on? My baseball hats fly off. Well, I'll tell you, I've got a lot of experience driving. I bought not this hat. This is a blue one. I'm usually in a brown one. I bought this hat first in London in 1972. And I've been driving with this same style hat since then. And you get to where you hook it way and bring it way down so that it really, it's a tight hat. You know, it's really tight, but 80 miles an hour in the MGA, it's just, and there's all that back pressure. You know, the windscreen is going through the air, creating a vacuum behind it, and then the air all rushes in behind it. So the back of your head just gets whop, 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 whop. You know, if you get wind wings, it can change some of that. And the MGB guys have got those wonderful air dams that they put in the back. Those things are great to cut down the amount of wind that comes in from behind you. Those things are dynamite. I haven't seen one advertised for an MGA. There must be one out there. I mean, if you're making them for MGBs, so somebody's trying to make them for an MGA, not sure exactly how they'd attach, but I haven't seen one yet. I've never had wind wings. I've never had one of those air dams. I've always worn this hat that stays on. So, John Dykey, wait, Mel, where are you calling from, right?
Yeah. And first of all, you know, we all have to look cool in our MGs. So
Yeah.
I've lost a lot of hats, and I'm calling from Sonoma County,
Yeah,
Northern
okay.
California.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. You gotta look the part, you know, so if you got a 57 Chevy, you gotta have a pack of cigarettes rolled up in your t-shirt. So, but with us, it's a funny little hat. So, hey, thanks for checking in.
Thanks, John.
All right, now we got John Dykes. When you read the questions, can you speed things up by not reading the random comments that are only meant for you? Just a suggestion. Oh, I just read your whole thing here, John. But yeah, yeah, okay. I'm given to gab, you can tell. So, where are you, John? You're in the East someplace. Is John on here? John Dykes?
Yeah, I am, John. I'm in Chelsea, Michigan.
Oh, all right, okay. Yeah, I knew that.
Down the road.
Yeah, 48 something, but I can't get any closer with your zip. So,
Close
okay.
enough.
All right. Okay, Donald Bartley. After cleaning bullet connections as well as humanly possible, is the use of dielectric grease a good idea? Almost everybody says yes. I still can't get there. Why would you put grease on a connection? You know, but I know it's supposed to hold the connection and pass the current and so forth. I just can't get there myself. I always do them dry, but almost everybody I talk to says, "Oh, absolutely, use the grease. It cuts down on the corrosion. There's no impedance to the flow of electricity at all. It's great stuff." So there. I don't use it, but almost everybody else does. So, and Don Bartley, where are you calling from? I see up there, but you're still muted. Can you unmute yourself? Lower left-hand corner. I see ya.
Here I am.
There.
Valparaiso, Indiana.
Whereabouts?
Valparaiso.
Valpo. All right. Okie
Indiana.
doke. All right. Well, good luck with your electrics.
Yep, it definitely is supposed to prevent oxidation.
Absolutely. That's what they all say.
Yep.
Okie doke.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. From HMAC 3 to everyone. Yes. Hey, we got a heads up here. Yes. Okay, Greg to everybody. Who's Greg? I bought a 68B with a C's motor. Who's Greg here? Okay. All right. Where are you calling from, Greg?
I'm in Bowmansville, Pennsylvania.
All right. So if you called me first, I would have told you not to take the head off. But Marvel Mist Oil is just fine. Let it sit in there, and then strip off the right-hand side of the engine. Take off the alternator, the distributor, the heater control valve, and the starter motor. Get that side of the engine all cleaned out, and then use a pry bar. It's just a little tiny picture here of me, but I mean, get a pry bar that's like that long and put it down and lever against the rear engine bearing plate and the teeth and the flywheel and try to move it clockwise. Do it the other way, try to move it counterclockwise. If it doesn't move, okay, it doesn't move. Wait till the next day. Try it the next day. Try it the next day. Try it the next day. One day when you're doing that and you're moving it, it'll start to move. And once you break it loose, then you can walk it around. Then you can put a rope on the front of the car, assuming the brakes are good, and tow it behind another vehicle at 20 miles an hour in third gear or something or other. And those pistons are going to be going up and down, and it's going to scratch itself loose. and then you put the head back on and start it up and go out and drive it. And the only downside of this is that if the oil control rings aren't any good, you're going to end up using lots of oil. But you'll know that right away. It'll either smoke, or you get back after a 50-mile run and you're a quart down or something or other. So that's you can always bring an engine back to life that way. If you go the rest of the way, take the engine out, all of a sudden it's new pistons, new rings, new bearings, new cam, new lifters, because you can't put anything back in that's faulty, and you'll end up spending a couple $1,000. So that's what I would do. Wait for it to get loose and exercise it on the back of another vehicle by pulling it and putting it back together, you know, by head gasket and top end kit or something, put it back together and just go for it.
Yeah, I had cleaned a lot of stuff out of the third cylinder, and there's a slight bit of rust in the top of the cylinder where the piston's about halfway down.
Remember what I said about the piston supposed to be halfway down when the engine shuts off? Yeah. Yeah. Well, all you can do is just try it. I mean, it's if you take it apart, that's what my late wife Caroline said. If you take it apart, they develop an appetite, and they'll chew through your checkbook real fast. So your option is either make it run now and see what you got. 5 factors. There are 5 factors in determining how good the engine is. Does it leak water? That's usually easily fixed, unless it's a cracked head or a cracked block or something horrid. What's the compression? Can't check the compression right away. It has to run for a while first, because there's always rust on some of the valves. What's your oil pressure going down the road? What's your oil consumption? And what's the condition of the cam? And you really can't tell what the condition of the cam is unless you take the push rods out of the way, take the valve train off, and put a dial indicator. We'd already talked about one of those, a clock gauge, and check the lift on each push rod. But those are the 5 factors, and the oil consumption and oil pressure are the ones you're after. So it's either that, or get the checkbook or the charge card out and get the Moss Motors catalog out and start stripping through all the parts that you think they'll need. If you want to rebuild the engine, write me. I've got several pages of notes about all the stuff that you'll need. But I just pull it, wait for it to break loose, pull it, and put the head back on it and start it up.
Okay, thanks, John.
Where are you calling? You said where you're calling from, Pennsylvania?
Yes, just south of Reading in a small town called Bowmansville.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm going to mute everybody again. And now we're going to HMAC 3 that says makes better contact. That must be about the dielectric grease. All right, so now we've got Tony Choviak. Tony, you can unmute yourself. Tony says, my 1966 MG 1100 temp gauge reached halfway between normal and hot on a long run in 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I checked the engine at the sending unit in the head. It was 213. I'm going to mute everybody again. Okay. I checked the engine and it was 213. That's pretty hot. And the water pump temperature was 203. The water pump's new, the radiator's been recored. Is this acceptable, or should I worry? I wouldn't worry. You know, until the water actually boils during operation, you have no concern. I mean, people look at their temp gauge, all MGA owners, well, Tony's got an MGA, all MGA owners look over at their temp gauge. If you look at mine on that Facebook, if you go on my site on Facebook, University Motors on Facebook, you'll see that my temp gauge is running about 180, 90 miles an hour. It was a little cooler day, but my car always runs cool. But I put in one of those Clark & Clark wire mesh grills on the front of my MGA, the stainless mesh. It's not original. Forrest Johnson, who took over my shop, just puts his finger in his mouth every time he sees my car. He thinks it's so ugly, but on the other hand, dude, it's like it runs cool, So I wouldn't, as long as it's running right and it's running okay, I wouldn't be concerned about it. So
Okay, thank you.
okie doke. All right, Tony's calling from Waterville, Ohio, which is really Toledo. It's not Toledo, it's Waterville. But just up the road from Grand Rapids, Ohio.
Yep. We're in the southernmost part of Lucas County.
Okay, all right. So everybody has to wear masks and wipe themselves with dielectric grease.
Yes.
Yep. All right, okay. Hey,
Thanks,
thanks a
John.
lot, Tony. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, well, now we got Jim Marlins. It says, I'm planning to redo my brakes. Do you recommend anything beyond standard rotors? The parts houses have standard and then several levels of upgrades with slotted, and I'm driving on twisties. That's funny. In the north Georgia mountains, and maybe as far as the tail of dragon. You wrote me about this the other day, and I apologize I didn't answer it. Anyway, no, all that brake stuff. Jim, did you unmute yourself?
I have, John.
Okay. All that brake stuff, this is just my own opinion, of course. All that brake stuff is hocus pocus, right? So if you're driving down the road and you jam on your brakes, like emergency stop, like a kid just ran out in front of you, can you skid all 4 tires?
No, absolutely not. I have to, for a quick stop, I have to really stand on it.
That is odd.
Yes.
What year
Always been
model
like
is
that.
this?
It's a 74.
B?
Yes.
Do the rear brakes work?
They do. Right now, I just took it out of storage, and they are the only ones working at the moment.
Oh, no, the front brakes always work. Unless they drain down. All right.
I've got fluid leak on those, and the rotors are just torn to shreds. So I need to do all around, all 4 corners.
My experience is that on everybody's car, unless you've got some super duper tires, you can skid your car. And if you can skid your car, then you don't need better brakes, you need better tires, right? Because that's what's breaking loose first, is the tires. What kind of tires do you have on the car?
Oh, I think they're new. I think they're Yokohamas or whatever, something like
they're
that.
Nothing special.
No.
So no, there's something up with your brakes. So yeah, just put the normal rotors on. Now there's all these different pads out there, and I cannot speak with any intelligence at all about the pads because a lot of the stuff has changed. Even in the better part of the 5 years that I've been out of the trade, I know some ceramic pads, they've got those. Well, those are great as long as you've bedded them in and got them hot. I think those are the ones. Otherwise, they don't work at all. So there's a whole bunch of different pads that you can get. The brake shoes are almost always the same. So my experience has always been rebuild the calipers. You can do that at home. You can buy new ones, but the old original stuff is better. If you want to bail on that and say, it's just too creepy, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to buy stuff that comes from the same place COVID came from, then you can send your stuff to White Post Restorations in White Post, Virginia, and they'll rebuild your calipers. The rear wheel cylinders are a deal. They're so simple. A caliper's a little more exotic, but always put in new rear cylinders. Just do it. New hub seals, new shoes. You don't need new drums. Just get your drums turned. Most brake places aren't too concerned with the diameter. It can go 10.060 inches, 60 thousandths over. But just get them skimmed, and as long as you're using like .4 fluid, and as long as your brake master cylinder is okay, which means that it's rock hard, when you get all the brakes done, they'll be great. You just don't have to upgrade.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
Carl Heidemann, my associate, I call him my associate. He worked for me a long, long time ago, and we started the British Motor Trade Association together and all that kind of stuff. He's done a lot of experimentation. He's done like 12 or 1,400 pulls on a dynamometer with an MGB, so he knows what works and what doesn't work, what cams, what distributors, what carburetors. He knows. He just knows. And anyway, he went out to see how long it took to get his brakes to fade. And I can't remember if it's a modern B or a 74 before B, but he accelerated to 60 and then did an emergency stop, and he had to do that about 10 times in a row to get the brake pedal to start to feel funky. Okay, and that's nobody drives like that. Not 10 60 to 0 stops in a minute and a half or something. Nobody drives it like that. So I'm convinced that the original brakes are just great, and you don't have to go to the wild root ones and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's just a bunch of hocus pocus. So
Sounds good, John. Thank you so much.
right, and you're calling from northern Virginia, someplace.
North Georgia, Gainesville, Georgia.
Georgia. All right. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you, John.
So we're going on next to HMAC, who's been logging in here. Greg, it depends on what is seized and was there new oil in the pan. So anyway, that has to do with that frozen engine. But my experience has been you just keep working at it with a great big pry bar, and it'll eventually. I've never failed to thaw a frozen engine ever. Well, that's a lie. There was a 1500 midget engine once that we couldn't. We finally did get it loose, and then we put a chain on it or a rope and dragged it around the block. And it was so horrid. We took the sump off after that and found out it had been underwater. So anyway, let's see. This is still, I think, trying to get this engine apart. Yeah, today I pulled ahead, and the problem is number 3, rust in the cylinder, oil. Yeah, so just wait. We had a guy from Bob Pingree from Ann Arbor, so Jackson, someplace like that in Michigan, and he decided he's going to tune up his TF. He took the spark plugs out and, I don't know, wandered away and brought us a car about 10 years later. By now, all the air and moisture had gotten inside that engine, and I was damned and determined that we were not going to take that engine apart, that I was going to unfreeze it. I was going to loosen it up the way it was. And I ended up taking a propane torch and opening it up and putting it underneath the sump and just letting it run. And I don't know how hot the engine got. It never got up to water boiling. There's not that much energy in a propane torch, but we got it hot. And after a whole number of days, we got it loose. And another trick that I used to use was taking my compression gauge, threading it into the hole, this assuming that the head's on, slacking off all the rockers so that all the rockers are off the valves, and putting air pressure onto each cylinder, and that would force the oil down past the rings. Can't do that now because the head's off. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff you can do other than taking the engine apart. So, all right. So now we've got Mike Palin, and Mike, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, John.
Okay, how you doing? You got an MGA starter switch. Second failure, stays engaged.
Yeah, and I had to, so the spar is just spinning, so I had to force the pull shaft down to stop it,
Jeez.
Further down, I've written the second question, of course, because I hit the enter button. But it's the same thing with the quality of them, basically. You read things about, where they come from, England or wherever. I tried to buy a Lucas one, but you can't buy them out here. Now, that may not be.
Well, you can go on eBay.
Yeah.
And Greg Purvis, I worked with Greg for on and off for 40 years. And he was the same mindset that I am, and that is that you can, anything used, rebuilt, anything original rebuilt is better than anything new. Now, obviously, you can't reuse bearings. No one's going to reline a bearing, okay, or put stuff back on a brake pad. But he was able to open open an old one up, open it up, get inside, sandblast everything, get it all nice and clean, surface it, put it all back together, worked like $1 million. So, you know, the only other thing that I might say to you, I guess I don't know if this is a continuing problem with those or not, is that if there's some bizarre reason that your starter motor is drawing twice as much current, for instance, as it should, it's going to want to weld some of that stuff, spot weld some of that stuff together. But that's
the other thing I thought about was using a starter solenoid from an early B and a push button, you know.
I've seen that on the MGAs. The only problem is that I don't think there's enough room. You have to open up the hole in the dash. But Healy's did that.
Yeah.
You know, Healy's that little more expensive car. You know, you wouldn't dare ask the owner to pull something to start it. You know, just press the button. You could do that, or you can just hide a push button up underneath someplace and do that. I haven't known any of those to be bad. So I mean the new ones. I haven't known them to be bad. So there's lots of these ones around. I always refer everybody out to Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado. And Paul has a tremendous supply of stuff. Now, I don't know if he'd have an MGA starter pull, probably not, but you never know. So,
okay. Well, my question continues further down. I've just replaced the rod and main bearings in the engine because I had low oil pressure.
Yes.
And I thought, well, you know, thinking back to England where they used to do that, I thought every 30,000 miles anyway. And I replaced them. I now have good oil pressure, but at tick over, it oscillates at 40 PSI, just goes like that.
Sure.
Is that unusual or?
No, it's not. The oil pressure relief valve, you're watching the oil pressure relief valve open and close. So you got that spring in there, and the pressure's just at that magic point where it pushes the valve off its seat, and then the oil pressure falls, so it goes back on its seat, and it oscillates. That's real common with a later Model Bs. You know, it idle, and you just see them popping. But the instant you put your foot on the throttle, goes right back up. So I
knew you'd put my mind at rest. Thank you. The quick third one was, of course, the other thing about the car is that when I was running it before, at 50 miles an hour, the speedometer would oscillate.
Yes.
And while I had it all to bits, gearbox and everything out, I took the speedo cable and I ran a drill on it, and the wife watched it, and it didn't oscillate at all. I put it back together again, it still oscillates.
Really?
Yeah.
That the drive gear on the main shaft in the MGA is keyed. So only if someone left that key out, and the rear nut on the gearbox is this a 1600?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So if the rear flange is loose because the nut on there is loose, and someone didn't put a key underneath the driven gear, then the driving gear, that is, the driving gear can slip. That's not uncommon on a late model MGB. Well, I guess it's rare, but it's not unheard of. So you can take the drive shaft off the ass end of the gearbox and put a rattle gun on that and bang, 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 and see if you can tighten up that nut. You can take the driven gear out and take a look at that and just see if it looks. I can't imagine you know, what is it, missing one tooth, you know, and it jerks when it's going around. But the test is putting the drill on that speedo cable and running it backwards. And most drills, you get 30, 40 miles an hour. When you do that, that is absolutely the test, unless it was because of the radius that's going through. And when you tested it, the cable was relatively straight. And now that the cable is bent, it's catching and whipping on the outer sheath. And that's the usual reason that the speedo oscillates.
Yeah. I think I'll live with it. I can't face taking the engine and gearbox out again.
Okay, right. And you can send your speedo off to Neisinger, and Peter will put a GPS, long as nobody shoots down our satellites, and then no one will care how fast you're driving. Anyway, that's past that's way beyond the pale. Anyway, he'll put in a GPS speedo, and those things are great. I mean, they always work. They're steady, they're electric. So unless you're positive Earth, and then I don't, anyway.
Appreciate it, John. Thanks for
Okay, where are you calling from, Mike?
Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay, all right. We got a lot of Pennsylvania people here. All right, thanks so much. I'm gonna mute everybody. I'm just doing that right now, and we're going down to Don Bueller. This says, John, thanks for solving my gearbox problem for the 52 TD. The second gear would pop out, and I had to hold it to avoid the pop out for years. And that's bad, because if you're holding it, then the selector wears against the gear. We replaced the lay shaft and still had the problem. Yep. Let's see. I sent Don my gearbox write-up. I have a real nice write-up about an X-Pag gearbox, just step by step. Also about a 3-main and 5-main gearbox for the A and the B. And if anyone wants that, write me, and I'll send you. Some of it's like laid out, and it's all like typeset, and it's all like real professional. And other stuff I've been sending out recently still has printer control codes on it for my LQ 1050 pin printer. I still haven't cleaned that stuff up, and I have had several people offer to help me with my tech book, and I'm getting real close, because I have not been able to get that done myself. Anyway, I'm way off the track here. John sent me his gearbox write-up, and now it stays in second gear. Great. I need to give John at least as many dollars. Great. UniversityMotorsLTD.com. Go to my website. Find the PayPal button. Okay. So, and all right. So anyway, where is Don Bueller from?
Hey,
Don,
John. I'm a member of the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, all right. Okay.
But I have just recently moved to Salt Lake City, and that's where we bought the car, and bought it back in about '64. So we had it for a long time with this second gear popping out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I did go over to Europe on Icelandic Airlines. I want you to know, about 70. Landed in Reykjavik and
Keflavik. You landed in Keflavik and then went to Reykjavik.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, you really saved me a lot of money, and I will be contributing to your PayPal.
Hey, thank you. It's very kind. Salt Lake City. I went through there. Oh my gosh. That lake, it's that metallic smell in the air when we were there in the middle of the summer. Oh my gosh, that was pretty intense. All right, I'm gonna mute everybody again, and now we're going to Ron McDonald. I just refreshed my engine in my 72B. We honed the cylinders and changed the rod bearings. Should I use 30-weight break-in oil, and for how long? Sure. I use 2050, but sure, absolutely. And for how long? Oh, the rule is 500 miles. you know, that's good. So Ron, you unmute yourself here?
Yeah,
Where's Ron?
I'm muted.
All right, okay. You're unmuted, but you're also, we can't see you either because I only see your name there. Yep. So I don't see a picture of you, but that's okay. That's all right.
I can't help that just now.
Okay. 30 weight break-in oil. Usually the break-in oil is for the cam, usually. But I'd say 500 miles. By then, all the scraping that gets done, you know, all the metal that ends up down in the sump and gets caught in the filter and so forth. After 500 miles, it's time to change it and change your filter. I love the Napa filters. They're so good, and I can't remember who makes them. Somebody will pop in here and say so. Say who makes them, but the Napa filter is Napa Gold 1064.
Wix makes them.
Wix. All right, it's a nice filter. The particulates that they take out are real tiny, and it's a 1064. Just remember the invasion was 1066, and it's 2 years before that. That's how I remember it. So anyway, and Ron, where are you calling from?
Saskatchewan, Canada.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. You still got snow up there?
No, it left yesterday, but we're looking for it tomorrow.
Thank you very kindly.
Thanks,
All
John.
right. I'm going to mute everybody, and then we're going to go to our next one, Mike Palin.
John.
Yep, but that's the same one, the starter switch failure, right? All right, so I'm going to pass you by again. And now we're going to Tim Bowman. And Tim, you can unmute yourself. He's got K&N filters on his 71 MGB. It runs great, but do I need to switch carburetor needles? There's a great debate on that. Yes, there is. The bottom line is, Tim, are you on here?
I'm here, yeah.
Okay, here we go. So if it runs great, I mean, I don't want to sound like Ronald Reagan, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it runs great, that's fine. If you're getting 25 miles per gallon around there, that's fine. The next step is to come off a high-speed run, maybe 10-mile run. And don't idle for very long. I mean, idle enough to get in your driveway or something or other, but don't idle for 10 minutes. And take the plugs out and take a look at them. And the plugs should be khaki colored, real light tan. If they're black, you're using too much gasoline or oil, but then not all of them are using the same amount of oil. And if they're bone white, ooh, that's too lean, means it's too hot, and you want to get a richer needle. So those are some ways that you can tell your mileage, 25 miles per gallon, and look at the spark plugs. Now you can have great match needles and everything, and your mileage can be in the toilet if you're doing hard accelerations and you live in the city and you're going from 0 to 50 to 0, you know, every stoplight and, you know, beating on the car. But if it's just normal use, highway use and stuff, that's what I tell people, 25 miles per gallon, and look at the spark plugs. And from that, then decide if those needles ought to be changed. I know, because they always say you go to AAA needles, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think we did that once on a customer car and it ran too lean or something. I don't know. So I don't remember now, but the whole thing was set up with a certain octane, and that's changed, and the certain air filters, and now you've changed those.
Right.
So are the needles correct or not? The optimum way to figure it out is to get an oxygen sensor in the exhaust pipe and put a wideband O2 sensor in there. No, not O2. It's not for free oxygen. Maybe it is. Brain fade. And anyway, and you monitor your unburned gasoline in the in the tailpipe and decide if you're running 14 to 1 or not. So that's the only true way of knowing what's going on. There are some of those that you can stuff the sniffer up the tailpipe and see what's going on there. So, and it isn't the O2 sensor. I think, does it measure CO? Carbon monoxide? Anyway, that's the only true way is to figure out for sure. But the poor man's way is look at your mileage and check the spark plugs.
Great. Thanks, John.
Where are you calling from?
Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Hey, I've been there. I've been to the cemetery. If you hadn't asked me, I'd be able to tell you. What's the cemetery on the south side of the expressway?
Old Salem.
Moravian, the Moravian.
Yep.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot.
Thanks, John.
And now we got David Lewis. He's got a 65B that doesn't like to go over 55 miles an hour, about 2,700 RPM. It vibrates a lot over that speed. Now, David says he wants to go faster. What do I do? Where's he calling from? Grand Rapids, Michigan. So anyway, David, are you here? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I am here.
All
Thanks,
right.
John.
Okay, how long have you had your car?
Actually, it's my dad's first car. He got it when he was 16 years old, so it's a one owner. He's still alive. He's on this Zoom. But I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's down in Florida.
Oh, and he bought it down there or something or other?
Bought it. Yeah, bought it in 1965, and Mom made him put a roll bar in it, and so he had to get one fabricated before she would let him have it as a 16-year-old. So.
And if he was wanting to drive fast and he's got wire wheels?
Yeah, it has. I have the car now. It's up here in Michigan, but yeah, it does have wire wheels.
Okay. All right. So there are only 5 things that are spinning when you're running at 55 miles an hour, and that's 4 wheels and a drive shaft. So it's one or more of those that are vibrating and causing the problem. Probably the wire wheels. The drive shaft you can take off and take to. It's on my resource page on my University Motors Ltd. Website. They're on Chicago Drive. You can get the drive shaft balanced, new U-joints put in it for $150 or something. But it's probably not the drive shaft. It's probably the front wheels. And if they're original to the car, they aren't going to work. You got to buy other ones and start over again. And you can get a set of. I don't know. I think you can get a set of. If you're going to do it, you're going to go all the way, and you're going to get a set of chrome wire wheels. You don't need to buy 5. You only need 4. But still, I bet that sets you back at least $1,200. And then as long as you're doing that, you got to get tires. And then as long as you're doing that, you might as well buy them from Alan Hendricks, Hendrix, in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's got a machine, and he sells the new wheels, and the new wheels ought to be straight. They're not. So he straightens the wheels first of all, puts tires on them, and he spins them, and he's got a blade, a razor blade, and he goes along and peels the little bits of tire that stand proud. So when you get these things, they are absolutely concentric with the center of the wheel, and it's like driving on glass. It is unbelievable, but it's a really expensive operation. So the home method of doing this is to jack up the front of the car, spin the wheels in front of you. Spin them. Are they doing this? Look at the top of them, the top and bottom. Are they doing this? Is you spin them, put your hand on them, and feel the tread. Is it choppy? Has it got a lump in it? If it's got any of that stuff, the tires are bad, or the wheels are bad, or both. Tires are only supposed to last for 10 years. If you can get new tires on there, and there's a guy down the corner of 57th 60th, about 60th and Division. It's a motorcycle shop, and they're real great. They'll get the wheels off and get them back on and balance them for you. I can't think of the name of that place, but it's about the same corner, I think, as Pine Rest on Division. Call me tomorrow, and I'll by that time I will have thought of it, and they can help you out, or it might be on my resource page too. So it's probably the wheels and tires.
Quick follow up. I just want to make sure I heard you right. Are you saying potentially buying new wire wheels or getting the wire wheels currently recalibrated or whatever?
You can't as a rule.
Okay.
The spokes and the nipples have all rusted together, and they're toast. So it just and you got 60 spokes per wheel, and if you're paying somebody, I don't know, some kind of labor rate of $100 an hour, by the time he's done screwing around with the wheel, it's just no, you buy new ones. It's just really expensive, you know. Okay. There's no such thing as good used ones. I mean, of course there are, but it'd be real difficult to find them. So anyway, just to hit it again, the poor man's way of doing it is spin the wheels and select the two that wobble the least and put those on the front, and then have them balanced someplace, and that's as good as you can do it. But I don't know if you're on Facebook, but you see my car going going way too fast for a little while, and my wheel's absolutely steady. So it took a lot of work to get there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Call me tomorrow, David.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. I'm going to mute everybody here, and then we're going to go down to Jeff. Turn your hat backwards. Sure. Now I look like some beatnik from 1956, huh? So when were beatniks? And what came between beatniks and hippies? All right. I need to go to a bike shop and get a hat leash. A hat leash. I've never heard of a hat leash because I've never had the problem. 2 alligator clips, and a chin strap. So so that's how you can keep your hat on. Hey, is that cool or what? All right. Okay. So we got an handicapped flat top. Wear it backwards. It'll never fly off. I'm looking down here. Oh, here we go. David Farrell. Okay. And David, you can unmute yourself. David says, I've got a Banjo Differential in a 66B, which is kind of weird because almost by then, almost all of them are the GT style of unknown condition. What should I look for? So David, are you here? Calling David Farrell. Going once. Going twice. I'll talk about it anyway. Banjo Differential. A Banjo Diff is a housing which has got a series of bolts around it. Looks like a banjo, and the differential fits into the front. Then the half shafts come in from the side. The new improved, which means they are new and improved. They're new and improved. 1965. 65 years ago. That can't be. 55 years ago. They improved the differential, and now the housing holds everything, and you can't just drop the differential unit out of it so easily to service it or to change gear ratios. So the Banjo Diff. You can change the front hub seal. You can change the outer hub seals. Those are got octagon nuts about that big around. You got to have a special tool to get those off. They tighten in the direction of wheel rotation. So just oil seals go bad. That's about it. You drain it out, clean it out, put some fresh oil in it. So anyway, that was the end of that one. So now we're going to Saverio Pota, 78B with a Weber downdraft. So you can unmute yourself. If
Yep,
you're,
I'm here.
okay. So the complaint is he's got a 78B with a Weber downdraft, and periodically when he shuts the engine off, the engine continues to run. Not diesel, but run. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it seems more like it's trying to run and versus dieseling, although it might be a bit of that too.
Okay, so dieseling is bump up, bump up, and it can even, the engine even can catch and run backwards for a little bit before it finally goes kapoof, you know. But dieseling is bump up, and it's stinky and horrid. But just running, just plain running, is a problem experienced by the 77 MGBs and the really early 1978 MGBs because of how the wiring was done. And that is that the ignition was wired through the ignition relay. Now the ignition relay turns on and off with the key. You turn the key on, the white circuit goes hot, the ignition relay goes hot, that fires up the ignition, not the fuel pump, that's from the key switch, but it fires up the ignition. So you turn the key off, and when you turn the key off, 1973 through 80, the anti-run-on valve comes into play, puts a vacuum on the gasoline in the float bowl, and the car stops dead, just stops dead. It's got no more fuel, it can't run. Stops instantly. But those systems have and do go bad. Mr. Pota here has a Weber on his car, so he cannot hook that system up to it. And in 77 and 78, the problem that happens is you take the key out of the car and the car continues to run. It just,
Actually, no, I think I might be more dieseling then in that case, because
Okay,
the car eventually does shut off, just to clarify.
okay, well then it's the same kind of deal. It's that lack of that anti-run-on valve. But at 77 through very early 78, you can take the key out, walk away, car still runs. It's running until the fuel pump cycles or something, and it draws the current down because there's a feedback through the ignition warning light that keeps that relay closed. They changed that real early in 78. There was not a problem later on. Dieseling, all of us have problems with dieseling unless our anti-run-on system's working well. You turn the key off and it just goes bump, 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 bump. So why is it doing that? Because you've got enough heat for combustion and you've got gasoline. Well, there isn't really anything you can do about the gasoline. So it's the heat inside the cylinder. So what can you do? You can turn your idle down. You can bring your idle down to 800, 700, 600. You read in the workshop manual, they talk about a tick over of 600. And it's like, nah, dude, you're stalling the car at the end of the stoplights. That doesn't make sense. So then there's the octane of the gasoline. If the higher the octane, the slower the burn, and it doesn't get quite so hot in the cylinder head, and that can help out. Another way to help out is to let the car just sit for just a second, just not a second, a couple of seconds, 5 seconds before you shut it off. In other words, don't just come down from 20 to 0 and turn it off, but let it sit and idle just for a couple of seconds and then turn it off. And if all that doesn't do anything, then you put it in second gear and turn the key off. And when you hear it coming down to its last couple of cycles, dump the clutch. Oh, isn't that bad for the clutch? Yeah, but it's got to be worse to have that engine going bang, 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 bang inside there, you know, tearing up the motor mounts and the engine brackets and the exhaust. So.
Okay, well, it does work better. It happens less when I do run premium. I'm just trying to save myself some money on gas because
they're still paying off that.
There's a big difference in the price for a liter of gas from Toronto, Canada. So.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right.
All right, but letting the engine cool down a bit or idle a bit, I'll give that a try and see if that helps. Because it does seem to be more of a hot thing.
Timing is also really critical. Timing is always critical. And if you have anybody who can check that for you, the timing should be 32 degrees before top dead center, 32 before top dead center, vacuum disconnected, and full mechanical advance. which means up around 4,000 RPM. So you can call me tomorrow. I'll tell you how to do that. Or if you got somebody to dial back timing light.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay. That's good.
32. Okay. Okie doke.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. Toronto. And now I've just muted everybody and we're going to John Boyle. Perhaps he has a problem with brake booster assist, but it was a 74B. It wasn't a brake booster. The brake problem wasn't that wasn't the guy from North Georgia. So, all right, now we have Jim Martins, no need to comment on air. Thanks for taking my question on brakes. I'm gonna do everything from the hoses all around. Okay, good. That he'll stop. He'll stop. So, all right, now we're on to Mr. Mine, John Mine, with a 77 MGB, who's got a strong smell of gasoline after driving, maybe during driving too. What could it be? So, John Mine, if you're still on, you can unmute yourself and come on and we'll talk about it for a moment because it's a real common problem, 77B. So, but
I'm here, John.
there you go. Okay. So the original, all the original fuel hoses, 77 through 80, were horrid. They, you know, normally if you have if this represents a fuel line, usually you get these little cracks, little radial cracks, and if you bend it too much, it'll start to leak out of there. Well, these 77 through 80 just rupture right down their length. It's just awful. Fuel supply lines and all the evaporative lines. So in the trunk, in the boot, there's a line that goes from the tank to the condensing canister, and from the condensing canister to a line that goes up to the front of the car to the charcoal canister. Those lines are probably fractured, and that just lets fuel smell come out into the trunk, and that wafts its way up into the front. Usually people get a smell when they're driving, and it's just, you know, you think, well, the engine's in front of you, you think the fuel smell is coming back towards you, but in fact, it's coming because of the displacement of the air and the air rushing forward to behind the windshield. It's sucking the fumes out of the trunk and moving them up and making that smell. That would be my number one guess. So change all,
I'll check that.
All those lines. So another reason on a 77B would be that the evaporative line, what kind of carburetor do you have? You still have a Stromberg carburetor?
The CD175 single.
Okay, that's a Zenith Stromberg. The choke comes loose on that. And
yes, it does, and it drips right onto the asbestos. And if it's not there, flame on, Johnny George.
yeah, big mistake putting that right on top of the catalytic converter. There are a lot of not currently fires anymore, but those are three 1032 slotted copper colored screws, and you get a screwdriver, get underneath there, get some of the air cleaner out of the way, and you put as much force on that as you can and get those screws as tight as you can. Some people put Loctite on them. That's a Permatex product, private Napa, blue Loctite, and it's just mechanics glue. You can get red Loctite, but then you aren't going to get the screws out again. So blue will
All
do
right. Now, one thing I noticed, I just had my fuel pump converted from to solid state from points, and there was a little clear plastic tube that came out of the top of the fuel pump and went into the fender.
Yes.
Is that ejecting some gas, maybe? Or?
No, there are two tubes, and because the original diaphragm, the original fuel pump has a diaphragm that deflects, right? Every time it cycles, it's pulling fuel up on this side. Well, over on this side, you're moving fuel on this side, but on this side, you're moving air, right? And so there was a valve, two ports on the original fuel pump, and one goes up into the trunk, into a little T, and the other one goes into the fender, and it's all designed to keep that part of the fuel pump from getting water in it and hurting the points. But now that you've got a different kind of pump, it's of no consequence.
Okay. And finally, I'll check all that. I found that when I drive my car now, I start it up and I drive it only for like 1 or 2 minutes. I shut it off, or if I'm not careful and it dies, I can't restart it for like about a half an hour or an hour.
Yeah, this is a problem for which I have no easy solutions. It has to do with the temperature underneath the car, and and if you're driving it for such a short distance, your choke may be still on, so it's too rich, and then there's some heat that comes up off there, and it boils the gasoline, because modern alcoholed gasoline boils at a lot lower temperature than an old-fashioned gasoline. And I don't have an easy solution. If it's a two-person operation, easy. You have somebody sit inside the car, you open the bonnet, unscrew the cap on top of the carburetor, angle it off to the side so it grabs the piston and lift up on it. And then almost always it'll start then. But that's a two-person operation, and that's a real hassle. You know?
Well, that's good to know. Why does it cure itself after 30 minutes or an hour?
Well, the choke's off. That's one thing. And again, I could give some BS answers here, but I'm unclear. I just saw someplace, I can't remember where, maybe it was on somebody's posting on Facebook, you know, the cure to hot start, or well, hot no start. And I thought I should read that, you know, because it's getting to be more of a problem. But pretty soon the temperatures are going to go back down again, the ambient temperatures. So. But it has to.
Thank you very.
Hey,
thank you very much, John. I'm an original owner, by the way, 77.
Congratulations. What color?
The Tahiti blue.
Oh yeah, all right, very cool. And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Cupertino, California, but I bought the car in Boulder, Colorado at Arnold Brothers, the Ford MG dealer.
Ford MG, okay. All right. Hey, well, congratulations. Thanks for checking in. And you got a really good guy up the road. Oh no, that was when you're in Boulder. Paul Dershout, Sports Car Craftsman, but yeah, I'm not sure about California. So.
Well, we have JR out here. I don't know if you know JR. He retired to Texas, though. But another guy. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, John, you were talking about the lines on the S77. I got at this at the very end. Did you say that get rid of the rubber lines or replace?
Replace them with stuff you can buy at Napa. It sounds like I'm a walking advertisement for Napa and Moss, but you know, Napa's got a lot of stuff, and they have a lot of MG stuff. And Moss and Engel out of Kalamazoo are my go-to places for most of my MG stuff. There's other places I go to, but I refer to them because Moss is the Goliath in the trade. But get rid of all the original hoses on the car, from the fuel pump to the fuel tank. That's a rubber hose. The lines in the boot, the lines underneath the bonnet. Get rid of those and buy Gates green hose. I suppose they're conning us into thinking that's environmentally good, but it is, because if you take a length of hose and put gasoline in it and come back a year later, some of that gasoline is somehow worked its way through. I'm gonna mute everybody here for a second because there's some background noise. There's a certain amount of gasoline in that hose. You come back a year later and most of the gasoline is gone. But in the Gates hose, they have reduced their loss dramatically, and it doesn't evaporate through the hose like it used to. It's really good stuff. Gates green hose, great stuff. So replace all of that in your 77 through 80 MGB, absolutely. Yep. Okay, now we're going to go down to Robert Schmidt with a 74 MGB. Robert, you can unmute yourself. He says, I've rebuilt the carbs, had the distributor rebuilt. The car ran okay, but backfired. In trying to track down the backfire, I pulled the air pump system and plugged the ports. Now the car runs slow. It bogs down when I push the throttle. What should I be looking for next? Well, Robert, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, so when you took some of the emission control stuff off, what did you do with the charcoal canister?
That's still attached.
Okay, and so the line that comes out of the float bowl from each carburetor and goes together and goes over to the charcoal canister, that's still in place.
It is.
Okay. I can't think of any reason.
I did, in the process, I did renew my charcoal canister because it did fill with fuel. That's the reason I rebuilt the carbs in the first place.
Okay. Okay. It bogs down when I push the throttle. So let's just, we aren't going to find out tonight, but take that line off the carburetor, the one that runs from the front float bowl to the rear float bowl and over to the charcoal canister. Take those lines off the carburetor, just take them off and go out and drive the car and see if that makes any difference. It should not make one iota of difference. But if it does, then the problem lies in the charcoal canister or the hoses or something. You can call me, my number's on my website. You can call me anytime and I'll talk to you more about it. Now that's pretty weird. I can't imagine taking the emission control system. That always helps, you know. And I don't think there's anything else going to. Can you get me a can you go sure? Okay. Can you get me a glass of lemonade? Thanks. So anyway, so those are just some ideas on that. But call me tomorrow after you, or whenever is convenient, after you've taken those lines off and gone out and driven it.
All right, thank you.
Ran okay, but backfired. I got to think about this some more. You know, I got to talk to you some more in a one-on-one and not to chew up the time here. So
sure.
So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. You're very, very welcome. Where are you calling from, Robert?
Philadelphia.
What's this about Pennsylvania? All the MG owners tonight are from Pennsylvania, except from we got one from Saskatchewan. No, I know there's guys from California and stuff. Okay, so now we've got Daniel Gomez. To everyone, what are your thoughts in the contrast between points and electronic ignition? So Daniel, what year and model do you own?
I have a TF 54 and an MGA 56.
Okay. If you take your distributors and send them to one of two places, to either Jeff Schlemmer at Advanced Distributor in Minnesota or to Rob Medinsky at British Vacuum Unit in New Hampshire, they will redo your distributors and do just a wonderful job on them. And both of them will campaign heavily not to have electronic ignition inside. Now,
okay.
Now, why would you have one versus the other? Well, if you have electronic ignition, there's no wear on the points. The dwell never changes. The timing never changes. It stays spot on and works great until the moment it fails, and then you're off the road, right? Unless you're carrying another one. So if you have electronic ignition, if you have to have one, then buy two. Carry one in the glove box along with a Phillips screwdriver so you can change it. You know, or the whatever tools that you figure you're going to need. It doesn't make any difference between points and electronic. There's no change in performance. The racers use points because there's some radio frequency caused by the electronic that screws up when you're running at 8,000 RPM. But chances are you're not going to be running in that unless you miss a shift. I'd go with points.
Okay, thanks.
Pertronics is great. Pertronics is a failure rate that's like minuscule. Great units, great. Every now and then you run into a snag with them, but I lost 2 Pertronics in 4 weeks on my own MGA, and I went back to points because if you got a penny or a tire iron or a screwdriver or a stick, you can make the points work again. But electronic, you just can't. So where are you calling from?
I'm actually in Bogota, Colombia.
Oh my gosh! All right.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not
cool.
in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Oh boy. You're that it you in is that the Mile High City?
Yep.
Bogota?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. So you got to tune your car when you're driving it in Bogota, but then richen it up when you're back down in the down below.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Well, hey, thanks for checking in with us.
Thank you.
I'm muting everybody again here, and I'm going to Greg Perigo. Greg, are you still on? Oops.
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Okay. Greg wants to know the trick for properly aligning the hood on the MGB, and he probably means the bonnet.
That is correct.
Okay. So at the factory, they drilled 2 holes in the hinges, and those are 1/8-inch holes. So you can take some like number 10 finish nails, not number 10, maybe 8 finish nails, and you can put those through and get the original factory alignment. But after that, you're just on your own. You're on your own. You can make a case for taking the spring and plunger out of the front of the bonnet, because you got to keep bringing it down and checking it and moving it back up. You bend the stuff by hand. You push against it. You loosen the hinges. You keep filling. But if you take that spring and plunger out, then you can open and close it. You don't have to walk around every single time, wear the heels off your shoes to pop the bonnet back open. So replacement fenders aren't the same as factory fenders. Replacement bonnets aren't even close. So there's only so close you can get with new stuff. Old original stuff will still work pretty well, but it's just finesse.
All right.
With wood stick.
That's with wood.
And stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
So, and Greg's calling from
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Fort Wayne, Indiana, home of Whoa.
Oh, you love Whoa. I love Whoa.
Okay. All right. I'm going to mute everybody, and we're going to go over to Paul Root. Oh, it's a 1068, not a 1064. Oh, Paul Root, you saved me. You saved me from, well, you haven't saved me. You've exposed me from or for great humiliation. The Wix filter, the Napa filter, is a 1068, not a 1066. I had the or a 1064. I had the 1066 down, but I subtracted 2 instead of adding 2. So that filter, if you wrote that down for your MGB, 1970 through 1980, the Napa filter or the Wix filter is a 1068, not a 1064. Thank you, Paul. Where are you calling from, Paul? You still on? We're waiting. Well, anyway, thank you very kindly. All right, so here we got a note from Stan about the U-joints on the drive shaft, and if that can cause vibrations. So Stan, you can unmute yourself if you're here. And this is a follow-up from the gentleman in Grand Rapids who has the wire wheels, which are probably the source of his problem, and that's why the car is shaking so badly at speed. I didn't mention a bad shock. I could have mentioned a bad shock when I was talking about it, but I completely forgot. That'll cause anything. I mean, it doesn't matter how well your car is balanced. That'll cause a problem. But anyway, Stan is weighed in here, and he said if the 2 U-joints on the drive shaft are not lined up, can that cause vibrations? Yes, it can. The fixed axis on the drive shaft have to be parallel. If they're off by 90, hard to do this, If they're off by 90, then there's no U-joint action at all. So something has to give. The front of the diff has to jump up and down, the back of the gearbox has to jump up and down, or the drive shaft has to bend. I've seen it all, and I've seen lots and lots and lots of drive shafts installed poorly. But that wouldn't give you a vibration so bad that you couldn't drive the car above 65 miles an hour. But it sure can cause a problem. So, thanks, Stan. Doug, regular or premium gas in late model MGBs desmogged? Doug, are you still on? If you're on, you can come on, see what late model MGB you've got. But I can yeah, okay. Here. So what year is your car?
80.
80. Where are you calling from?
Holland, Ohio.
Okay, we got a Holland, Michigan, and a Grand Rapids, Michigan. So
I talked with you last week about that, about the the side valve covers leaking and and all that. You're very, very cordial.
Thank you. I'd use 89 octane, just a step up from regular. I wouldn't buy the premium gasoline in the MGB. I'm still convinced that they're still paying off that Exxon Valdez beaching.
I'm not having any problems, but with the conversation earlier about the premium and regular gas, I got curious. So I'll look.
I run in my MGA, but I'm pushing 11-to-1 compression. I use high test, and for almost everybody else, I tell them just go for the 89 octane. That's good. If you get spark knock, on acceleration, oh boy, either your timing's wrong, your distributor's bad, or you got bad gas. And by bad gas, the octane is too low. So, so just run with the 89. Fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug, from Holland, Ohio. And Steve. Okay, here we go. Steve, with a 75B with a Zenith Stromberg carb that my shop rebuilt some time ago. Probably that's what that means. I wonder how long ago. Haven't been in my shop. Well, anyway, what's the proper way to adjust the mixture on a Stromberg carburetor? You have to do it with the air cleaner on. Got a long story about a guy sleeping over at my house because I couldn't get his car tuned up, and it turned out that you have to have the air cleaner on the Stromberg to make it work right. So you got to do the adjustments with the air cleaner on, which means you can't lift the piston by hand. And just like an SU, you lift the air piston to judge the change in RPM. So now you've got the $10 adjuster tool that you can buy from everybody. Victoria British, Moss, having in spares. Everybody's got it's a long 1/8-inch Allen wrench. It's got a little device around it with a pin in it. Because if you just put the 1/8-inch Allen wrench down inside the carburetor and start turning, there's a rubber diaphragm. It'll turn the diaphragm, tear it. You've got more problems. So this device holds the piston. You got to hold the piston and then turn the adjuster. And there's about 4 or 5 turns, lock to lock, or from all the way lean to all the way rich. So you put this guy down inside there, and you turn the piston holder one way, and you load the Allen wrench the other way just a little bit, so it sort of jams on the piston, and you pick the piston up as little as you can. What, 1/16 of an inch? And the car's kind of shaky and it's kind of dicey to do, but you pick it up as little as you can, and you judge the change in RPM. If you've got a moving coil tack, oh boy, that's great. You can watch it and see what's going on. Otherwise, you got to listen. And you're listening for a slight increase and then a fall off in the RPM. If the car's already adjusted too lean, if it's too lean and you lift the air piston, the RPM is going to fall right off instantly. If it's too rich and you lift the air piston, which reduces the vacuum in the venturi, then it's going to suck less gasoline out and it's going to run leaner. and better, then as you lift the piston, the RPMs are going to go up, 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 up. What you're looking for is just a bare increase in RPM and then falling away. And you do that by turning the adjuster tool by full turns, half turns, and finally by quarter turns until the car is doing what it's supposed to do. So that's how you adjust it. Doesn't take very long at all, unless, of course, something else is wrong, which it very often is with the Stromberg, and the choke is partway on, or there's some gasoline leaking someplace. So anyway, I asked Steve to come on. He didn't come on. I don't know where he's from, so I don't have to mute anybody here. And here's from Mr. Brown saying he tried to make a PayPal donation and there was some kind of jam up. Well, try tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after. So I don't know. It was, you try to make a donation through Visa, not PayPal. So maybe that's why. I don't know. I don't even know I don't know what Visa payments are. But anyway, thanks to everyone, who makes donations. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so here we got a comment from Paul Root about late Model B, 75 through 80, not starting when it was hot. And if Paul's on, you can come on, you can talk to me a little bit about this, at least we can find out where you're from. But he says that what he's done to get his car to start is to making a bigger heat shield between the catalytic converter and the carburetor. Now, the original heat shield is about like this. But if you make one that's larger, then it's going to keep the gasoline from boiling. And that's the whole goal here, is to keep the gasoline from boiling in the Zenith Stromberg carburetor. The reason it boils is because the heat's there, and the heat gets there through conduction, convection, radiation. Well, there's no conduction to speak of because the intake manifold is ice cold and stays cooler, so that it doesn't conduct through there, so that's not the problem. Convection, that's the underbonnet heat that rises up from everything when you turn the car off. I call it latent heat. A physicist, no doubt, will correct me, call it something else. But that's the heat that's left over in the engine that doesn't get cooled by the cooling fan, because you shut the engine off. Just as it takes a while to warm the engine up, it takes a while to cool the engine down. And when you shut the engine off, the temp goes way up. I mean, on an MGA, you can watch it go right up to 212, 230, sometimes up to 100 pounds of oil pressure as it goes around in the safety gauge. And then after a while, it calms back down again. But the biggest problem is probably radiation. And if you got a catalytic converter, if you got an air pump and a catalytic converter, that thing is it's a factory for heat. Oh my gosh, those things get hot. That's their job. That's their job, to reduce the unburned hydrocarbons, the unburned gasoline, with extra air from the air pump. But most everybody's taking the air pumps off. It's a good thing. Don't take off the charcoal canister. That's passive. Takes no energy. Doesn't hurt the way the car runs. Unless, we've talked to a couple of people tonight who had problems with maybe with the hoses and stuff like that. But the air pump robs a little bit of power off the engine and causes all kinds of running problems. So anyway, this guy, Paul Root, made a bigger heat shield and solved his problems. You can buy those heat shields for T-types. I don't know if Moss has got those. I know you can get them from Brown & Gammons in England. So anyway, that is an issue. David Farrell is weighed in with the one word, Texas. Must be that's where he's from. Okay, David.
I also have a comment a little lower.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a 66 MGB that I'm restoring, and I received a whole lot of extra parts when I got the car. And one of the things is I've got my heritage certificate, and it was a wire wheel car, and I'm trying to take it back to where, God and MG planned the car to be in the first place. And it's got it. I have in the pile of parts a banjo axle, which was original to the car, I think, maybe. maybe not, because it's got, right now it's got steel wheels on it. And I want to know what I need to do to check to kind of go over the rear axle, what it needs to have looked at. I mean, they're pretty bulletproof from what I understand. And just, can I get away with just like replace, do I have to pull the whole carrier out and go that whole route, or can I just replace like the outer bearings, or, you know, what do I really need to do to just kind of, you know, check it out, A, and B, what should I do as far as you know, like a light end restoration, cleaning it up?
First of all, we got to decide whether it's the correct rear axle for the car. Is it wire wheel or disc wheel? The rear axle.
It's a wire wheel rear axle.
Okay.
You know, and it's got all the parts there for that.
Okay. I was surprised when you said that you had in the earlier comments that, because it's a 65B.
66. Yeah.
66. They were not using that Banjo that late, so I don't think it's from that car. So let me propose this: someone bought it and said, "I'm going to put wire wheels on that car someday," and now you've got it, and you're thinking the same thing.
Okay.
If it's a wire wheel, well, it's a wire wheel rear axle because it's got the hubs on it. So, and it's got MGB brakes on it, I assume. And so you can look at yours and look at that one, and because an MGA diff looks remarkably the same. But if it's an MGB, then
what's the difference between the later and the earlier axles on the MGs? Weren't there two different axles?
The Banjo, the pig, the differential unit, the pumpkin, a lot of different names for it, fits from the front end in. There's a ring of 10 or 12 5/16 24 studs that stick out, and you put the whole differential in, and then once that's all in with the gasket, then you put the half shafts in. The later style, there's a cover on the back, and it's irregular shaped. It's kind of round, and then one side's flat, and it's a tin cover, and it's got it's got the filler plug in it, but the Banjo filler plug's in about the same place too. But it's a tin cover, steel cover, not tin, steel cover that fits on the back of the diff. So that's it. Either the differential unit either comes in from the front or the cover's on the back. So
what year did they stop? What did they stop those?
Well, it's called the GT diff because they used it with the GTs, and all the cars after that had them. That's the rule. They brought the GTs out in '65. So they used the Banjo up until around '64, sometime in '64. And if I had my AKD 3227 parts book out in front of me, I'd be able to tell you, but I don't. So, and in the end, it's just what your car is. So at this point, if you want to service that Banjo rear axle, you change the front seal. Doesn't matter. You get the front nut as tight as it'll go. I know that sounds just awful, but 80 pounds of torque will do it just fine. That's a real easy seal to change, just a dream. And then the seals out on the outside. Those are you got to have a special wrench because they're octagonal nuts. Oh boy. And they tighten in the direction of wheel rotation. So you got to get those off. You got to have a slide hammer to pull the hubs off. And then you got to use a very small, narrow chisel and drive the seals out, and then drive the seals back in by hand. Do not use a press. Do not use a press. Do not use a press. You'll bugger it up. You got to do it by hand, and then you can put it back together. I mean, you take the drain plug out and the filler plug and fill the thing up with some diesel oil and spin it around a little bit and everything and flush it out, and then just put 90 weight gear oil in it. GL4 90 weight. You should be just fine.
Okay. All righty. But you don't think that was you don't believe that was a original to the car, though?
No.
Okay.
No.
The car's kind of unusual. It was originally shipped to Panama.
Really?
According to the heritage certificate.
So
yeah.
it doesn't have a heater in it.
It did have a heater in it. It was
It
in
did
the,
have a
I've
heater.
got the entire, the order. It had a heater in it.
Okay.
Yeah, and somehow or another it made it to New Mexico, and then somehow or another made it to Texas. So,
Hey.
and I've talked to several people who've owned it. It's kind of a long, winding story. So it's kind of funny.
SM genealogy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well, thank you.
Hey, sure. If you got some more questions, call me. We can talk to some more about that stuff. So great.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to mute everybody. We're at 9:05. And so what I'm going to do, this is really horrible, but I can only take one more call. I got my daughter here from Chicago, and she's here to pick up her grandkid who's been here for the past couple of days. And my son's here, and most everybody knows I lost one of my kids last October. So family is a big deal. So I can take one more question, and then I got to skedaddle. I apologize, but we'll have the next one up. Next one is 14 days from now, so that'll be the 18th, 8/18. So so David Densmore has just weighed in here a little bit and said there's such a thing as a small screw low hold Loctite. So you don't have to get blue Loctite when you're putting in that 1032 screw. There's something you can ask them at Napa. I was unaware of this, but there's some kind of Loctite that you might be able to use that isn't quite as tight as that. And Ott says, is your website Universal Motors? No, it's University Motors. We've got degrees here, and we don't work on everything. So, all right. So anyway, I got one more. Steve from Richland, Michigan. Carb was rebuilt last time at University Motors. Last time we had an open house. That's been more than several years. Running regular 90 gasoline, never had an issue with starting with a hot engine. That's the weird thing. Some of the cars start just fine, and other people, oh my gosh, they got nothing but trouble. And it's not really easy. So anyway, I'm going to take my leave because it's 9:07, and I'm going to unmute everybody here for just a minute. And everybody's unmuted. We usually go on until about 9:30, but my daughter came in and pleaded with me to spend some time with my grandkid and my other daughter from Chicago and everything. So I want to thank everybody for weighing in, especially Mr. Gomez from Bogota, Colombia. That's a hit, It's always nice to have people from a long way away.
Argument is that if the $1,200 they would give to millions of Americans, help right now would make up.
Here we go. We got somebody on the radio here.
That's hilarious.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very kindly.
Good night.
All right. We'll see everybody next time around. Thank you.
Thank you, John from Australia.
Australia. Hey, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for New Zealand.
California.
New Zealand, thank you. I never know if it's yesterday, today, or tomorrow in New Zealand.
It's yesterday, no.
Yesterday, yeah, right.
Wednesday lunchtime.
Hey, well, then let me find out what happens in the future. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just the same as today.
Okay. Thank you very kindly.
Good night.
Night.
Our children. So these are